life of being a college band member, it's pretty fun. I mean, I marched 6 years. I think Jalen did 5 or 6 years, and you meet a lot of people, most of whom you like, some of whom you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's everywhere. That's regardless of where you go. No, it's a fun life. Lot, free games are nice. Being a student, being in the band. Me specifically, I was in the basketball pep band as well, um, and that just kind of keeps it going year round. It's it's a fun life. I will say this: in most college bands, you have
Mhm.
less rehearsal time than you do in high school. Um, Most high schools are after school from like 3 to 6, and we weren't even showing up till about 4:15, and a lot of times left before 5:45 as long as we did what we were supposed to. So,
Yeah.
um, it was honestly it was pretty easy life for 6 years.
Yeah. I would say the parts that I wouldn't say hated, but the parts that definitely were a little rough were we performed at the end of marching band competitions like as an exhibition performance, almost
Mhm.
like a recruiting tool of sorts. And there were times where we would have, we'd perform pregame, we're there for the game, we perform halftime, and then we hop on the bus and go to a high school competition to perform exhibition right after the game. So it's
Mhm.
like you wake up at 7 o'clock that morning, you're not getting back into your bed until like 1 a.m. And
Yeah,
like obviously we're not out there in pads and everything, but
Right.
sitting out there in the hot sun and those uniforms are not thin. So sitting out there in the hot sun, playing, performing, being on that turf field with the sun beaming on it.
Mm.
Because being in the South on a turf field, there are times when it feels like your shoes are melting. So doing that all day long, it definitely gets tiring sometimes, but it's rewarding. Our fans love us. I mean, they'll stay through a whole game because there are sometimes we'll have to perform after the game if it's like homecoming or whatever.
Mhm.
Our fans will stay all the way through the game and wait however long it takes for us to set up and do our show after the game. So it's really nice. We have a unique viewpoint at JSU when it comes to band kids and the support we get from the athletics and from the fans and the community as a whole. So it's really nice.
So can you walk us through? Because I must have not caught that. It sounds like you guys aren't like actually with the band now. You're former band members.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
former.
we're both alumni.
Well, that's got to be awesome. But can you kind of walk us through game day for a band member and based on what you were saying about like the beating sun, I know it probably doesn't rain too much down in the south, but when it would, I bet to a
Ooh.
degree, you were hoping for those game days on a rainy day.
Um,
Um,
hoping I don't know because pretty much every time we've had rain, it's been monsoons.
yep,
Um, and so we luckily we have ponchos for the entire organization. So you throw your poncho on, but we did not leave the game. We're
yeah,
both we're both brass players, so rain didn't mess up our instruments. So we had to keep playing. All the woodwinds got to put their instruments up because you can't get those messed up. But we had to keep playing. It's pouring, even with the poncho on. Like you're still getting drenched.
yep,
Your feet are all soggy and squishy, and yeah,
yeah.
like it was nice because you didn't have to do a halftime or a post game show, but it was still a little miserable.
Yeah. And here's the we talk about Alabama and having the heat. We also have hurricanes down here, um, unfortunately. And football season, specifically like mid September to late October, is the prime of hurricane season.
Mhm.
And I remember 2017 explicitly, we had four hurricanes impact Alabama in that one season, and so it rained a ton. Um,
Yeah,
and But here's the problem: it doesn't cool off; it just gets hotter. because the rain leaves and then the sun comes out and then it just gets steamy. And so it'd be 100 degrees.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, you cut out.
Well,
In
it
terms
sounds
of weather. In
But yeah, back to like a game day schedule. Most of our kickoffs were around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock Central. So you would wake up around 8, have a report time around 9:30, 10, depending on your section and your section leader. We'd warm up, walk into the stadium, and then we do pregame before every game. And then you're in the stands for the next 3 hours, 3.5 hours, 4 hours, depending. And then, depending on if there were halftime festivities, we either march halftime or post game. And then after that, if we didn't have any other responsibilities, you're free to do whatever. But I mean, it was on average, you'd spend around 7 to 8 hours doing band stuff or being at the field on game day. Pretty much just as much as football players, just obviously totally different perspective and responsibilities.
not as physical and whatnot per se.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what kind of what I don't know how to put this. What led you to the choice of wanting to be in the marching band? And for because you mentioned the word recruiting in a sense. So I guess in a sense the band also recruits, but like what was the process like, the transition from high school marching band to a college marching band?
You want it or you want me to take it? Because mine is probably a little bit different than yours.
I mean, we can both take it. Yeah,
I'd love to hear both.
Yeah, we have a little different perspective. For me, my high school, our band was a pretty competitive high school marching band. We did a lot of bigger competitions, a lot of the bigger circuits. So for me, it was kind of just a lateral move. The biggest thing is you sign up for camp, you register for camp, and then we don't have auditions until you get to camp, which requires marching and playing, just to kind of see where your skill level is at. But like I said, for me, I came from a pretty competitive high school, so it was kind of a lateral move for me. Wasn't much of a shock. A lot of the stuff we did at JSU, I did at my high school, and it was kind of just keeping the train rolling a little bit. But as far as recruiting goes, we say recruit in the sense that, like I said, we perform at the end of high school competitions. And that's really how a lot of college marching bands that do the type of shows that we do, that's how they get a lot of their members, especially because most of the bands that perform like we do are not super huge names. There's like us, there's University of North Alabama, there's Western Carolina, there's James Madison, which they're a bigger name now. But a lot of us, we don't really have that big name where kids will just go to school there and then by proxy be in the marching band like you would at in Alabama or UGA, USC. So we really relied on going to those competitions, or even if we have a big SEC game, like when we went to LSU, the Friday we left, we went down to a high school and performed at their football game. Just kind of meeting the kids, telling them about how we do. They get to see our show, and then the next day we go on to LSU. But yeah, that's a lot of how we recruit in a sense. Just going and performing for the kids to see, and kids absolutely love us. One of the big shocks for me was there was a show my freshman year. We were coming off the field. It was one of our regular shows we do, and these kids are like begging to have our drumsticks and the gloves that we wear and everything. And it's like, you don't want this, I promise. It's sweaty, it's gross, it's disgusting. But these kids are going crazy. I mean, it's similar to like if, say, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young were to go perform, do like a pickup game for a rec league or something. Of course, afterwards the kids will just be all over them. Obviously, we're not that huge, but the kids are still just as crazy.
Walk us through the process of making the show,
Okay,
like the
you got that
halftime
one.
show and whatnot,
Um,
without giving away stuff that you're not supposed to, of course.
in terms of like designing it or putting it on the field.
Just like the whole process, like from the start when the band is trying to decide on the process of like how to do the show, all the way to the finished product of what we see on the field.
So my last year was 2021, and we finished band camp the second week of August, and we got to a night rehearsal in the stadium, and the director's like, "Yeah, by the way, we've already started the design meetings for next year's show." They start pretty early because our shows are super in depth. They've got to work on getting our arranger has to get copyrights for all the artists that we use music from. They've got to start crunching. All right, what is the schedule going to look like? For games, for exhibitions, going to competitions and stuff. So for the shows that they expect to be a lot bigger, it starts the fall before. But normally the planning cycle will start, I'd say probably January or February. No, sorry, I'd say December, and then they have the show design picked by January and February every year. Usually, the show is announced Valentine's Day night. At midnight, they release it online.
Mm-hmm.
And so they take those 3-4 months before to get all of the selections together, get everything ready, and then once it's announced, they usually already have MIDI files of kind of the beginning of what we're playing, and so we can hear it. By the time late March rolls around, they're putting out early drafts of the sheet music for us to look at. Late April, we have this event called the Southerner Symposium, which has all the incoming freshmen come in and learn how to march our style. They read the music with us. It's for the new section leaders. It's their first chance to lead a group of people and kind of get used to what they're about to do for the next season. And then summer hits, and it's until July. It's actually pretty quiet. The marching ballerinas, our dance line, will have a lot of practices in the summer because them and the color guard get started pretty much from April from on, and they don't stop. But the horn line and the percussion normally starts late June, early July with sectional rehearsals, brass woodwind rehearsals, and then band camp hits first week of August every year without failure. In fact, it started. Today's Monday. This year it actually started yesterday, and those 6 months, it's all planning to get ready for that last week of August when JSU always has their first game. And after that, they're starting to put together for the next year. So it's a lot like the NFL where your season ends and you're immediately having meetings with your coaches, with your position staff to get ready for the next season. It really doesn't stop.
Yeah.
For us, it does, but for the directors, for the staff, it never stops. It is a 24/7, 365-day gig, getting, for us at least, getting our stuff ready, just because our show is so in depth and so more advanced than most collegiate shows. So,
Yeah. And then like for us, once you hit band camp, we usually march around 10-minute shows. That's usually about the amount of time we have for half. If we're sharing the field with somebody else for halftime, that's about the amount of time we have to perform a whole show. So our shows are usually around 10 minutes, and we will usually get not all, we'll usually get a good chunk, probably about 75% of that show on the field within those 2 weeks. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but whenever you have to learn all new drill, which is like our formations, how to get from formation to formation, and all new music, because usually by the time we get to band camp, the sheet music has changed 4 times.
yep.
But all new music, all new drill, and you have 10 minutes worth of doing those combined, as well as several other things going on in your mind at one time. We usually get a good 75 to 80% of the show on in those 2 weeks, and then we use the rehearsals after classes and stuff to go ahead and finish up the rest. And I mean, we usually have the full show done by the end of September at the very latest. But usually it's around mid-September we'll have the full show done. And then from there, it's just kind of nitpicking and working on how can we fix this here, this there. There may be a few slight music changes. I mean, it's kind of like relating it to football whenever you run a game plan and you're like, well, this didn't work quite how we thought it would. Let's kind of tweak these things here and there. That's basically what we do throughout the season once the show is on. It's not, we got it on good, that's done. No, we try to keep getting better and better. Better than the last is what a lot of the sections and the marching band say. You always want the show you're about to perform to be better than the last show you just did. So that's the big thing, just really getting detail-oriented, very nitpicky, just making those tweaks to try and get the best sound, the best look that we can. Because that's one thing we pride ourselves on is just looking good, sounding good, and just being a product that people would overall enjoy.
So you guys had mentioned that like your show is like one show compared to like Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, etc.
Yeah.
So is the process I mean, you obviously may not know per se. Do you think the process is the same for the bigger schools that do a different show every game, or do you think that it is the same, it's just vamped up, or like what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I'm actually from Auburn. I've been to several Auburn University marching band rehearsals, and I know a lot about that band. They learn 3 shows a year, as well as homecoming and Veterans Day, and then if they play the weekend of 9/11, they'll do a 9/11 memorial show as well. So 5 to 6 shows a year. They will perform each one 2 to 3 times. 2 times really, because they only play 8 home games, 7 8 home games every year. So they really don't perform each show much. Their process is a lot different because they will be rehearsing, like in that gray area between each show of the year. They're rehearsing both shows in rehearsal. So they'll do, like, let's say it's a 2-hour rehearsal. The first hour, like for a home game, they will grind on pregame because Auburn's pregame is super, super hard. And then they'll do a chunk for the show they're performing and then a chunk for the show they're learning. Their rehearsals, and this isn't like a knock on us saying that, we have it easy or anything, but Auburn's rehearsals have to be super efficient because they're learning so much at one time. And they're doing so many different concepts. Whereas us, we have this one show and the framework stays the same from start to finish. And the only thing we're really going to adjust is we may adjust a set here and there just to make the shape a little bit cleaner, make the formation cleaner. We will adjust music so that from the field it won't sound as bad. Like if there's a section that just doesn't voice properly to the fans, we'll know it because our directors are up in the box listening to it, and we'll get to rehearsal. And they'll say, "Hey, this doesn't like speak to the crowd, so we're gonna change something that'll make it a little more clean." But from August until November, the only different show we do is our reunion, um, is our Southerners reunion show. And even then, after the game, we do a post game show that is the full run of our show.
Yeah.
So we don't change up anything. We learn one thing from start to finish, and our goal is to perfect it so that when it hits October and the weather's perfect and we're not dying, we can have our best runs for the high school students so that they can look at us and say, "Hey, I want to go to JSU and be a Southerner," and we can keep recruiting. You mentioned the recruiting process. If we don't sound good, they don't show up. And I remember 2 years ago, we did a show for a Bands of America competition, and we performed so poorly, we didn't even post the video on YouTube. It was one of our probably the worst run that we've had since I was there. Um, and our directors were really, really frustrated that next week because it came out of nowhere. We had a great rehearsal week, and then we tanked it in the show, and they had to look around and was like, where did this come from? Why did this happen? So,
Yeah.
we try to be more efficient than we are, and we've actually gotten better. But compared to other schools that learn 3 or 4 shows, we do a lot less in rehearsals.
Yeah. I will say I actually have been lucky to talk to a couple of people who are in the Ohio State marching band. And I mean, as you know, they have basically a new show every home game.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest differences that Caleb kind of touched on is since we have the same show all year, we're able to slow our practices down a little bit and nitpick, whereas theirs, you have 2.5, 3 hours, and you have to try and get this whole show down in a week or 2 weeks if you have 2 weeks in between home games. And so for them, it's basically band camp before every home game because they have to hit the ground running and shove as much as they can into these 2 weeks so that they can go out and be the amazing marching band that they are. Because, I mean, everybody knows about them. Everybody loves them. But yeah, like Caleb said, not a knock on us. We're just able to slow down a little bit more and focus on a lot more, whereas those schools just have to be a lot quicker, have to be a lot more efficient. But hey, I love all marching band, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
We've been
Yeah,
lucky to see several different styles whenever the visiting bands do come or whenever we do travel. So I love it.
So, and it's not a knock on you guys, nor is it a knock on like the bigger schools, but it's almost like in a weird kind of way. It's almost like the smaller schools like JSU is kind of like up here, whereas the bigger schools are all kind of like down here because, like you both have said, you guys being up here factors in the advantage of like, okay, we're doing one show the entire year. So basically, if you come to one home game, other than watching the football team play during the game, you've seen all the games as far as the band show. Whereas I put the bigger schools down here because, like you said, Jalen, all the bigger schools, Ohio State, Bama, UGA, FSU, whoever, all do a different show.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily put us different levels like that. It's just different styles.
yeah,
Because, like I said, I love Ohio. I love knowing Ohio State has a home game. What's the show this week? And then some people like the more traditional style of your Bama, your UGA. So it's not necessarily like tier 1, tier 2. It's just different styles. Each style has their advantage. Each style has their disadvantage. Because with the other schools, fans show up knowing they're going to see something different every week. Our fans, even though they stay for after every game and they love us, they know it's the same thing. It's the same thing every week, and they're just coming back because they love us, they support us, and we try to put on a great show. So, like I said, just different styles, not necessarily like a tier 1, tier 2. Some people like our style. Some people prefer the rotation. Just depends. Everybody has their own thing. Some people like shotgun. Some people like spread offense.
yeah. So,
All right. So let's kind of transition to, I'm sure, what everybody wants to talk about. And let's talk